Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to create the functionality for our project using JavaScript. We are going to create a few functions. I've created the first one here. I've called it get time remaining. When defining functions, you type in the word function followed by a space and then the name you call the function. Always name your functions to reflect what you want them to do. Every function will have a parenthesis and it can be empty, or you can pass in values also known as arguments or parameters. Notice I've passed it a parameter or argument called end time. The end time is a property that returns the time that ends in seconds. It returns the ending time in seconds. Line 2, I have created a variable. Line 2, I've got a variable called, I've named it just with the letter T, and I've set it to equals to the date dot pass, and then passed it an argument of end time, which we spoke about from line 1, the end time property. The end time property basically returns the time ending in seconds, and I've set that to minus the date dot pass, and then in there you will pass it in the new date function or method. The date dot pass method is used to pass a date or string and returns the number of milliseconds. Okay, so usually it's between the date string and the midnight of January 1, 1970. On line 2, we've got the new date here, a new date object here. So what that does, it creates an instance of the date, and which represents a single moment in time. The date objects are usually based on the time value. All right, that is usually the number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. Line 3, created a variable called seconds, which I've set to equals to the Math.floor method. The Math.floor function is a JavaScript function that is used to return the largest integer less than or equal to a given number. So on line 3 there, I've in the Math.floor function, I've passed it inside this parameter. I've passed it the variable from line 2, divided that by 1,000, and then taking 60% of that. That will give us the seconds, the time in seconds. Line 4, I've done a similar thing to achieve the time in minutes. Line 5, done the same thing to achieve the time in hours. That's 24 hours. Give me a 24 hours clock. All right. Notice that line 4, I've divided that by 60, then and the percentage. However, line 5 done the same, 1,000 times 60 again, then the percentage is 24. Okay, that will give us the hours. Then to get the days, which is on line 6, did similar thing. That you divide it, you have 1,000 times 60 times 60 times 24. All right, that will give us the days. You divide the variable by the variable t, you divide that by these values. When you have values surrounded in parentheses, that means you achieve this first. What that means, the multiplication will take place first before the division. All right, and similar thing with that. You do the multiplication before the division. Anything in parentheses takes a precedent order. Line 7, I've also specified a return. Note you can define returns with functions. Functions don't have to return anything, but if you want them to return something, you can always use a return. So I've specified that here on line 7 to return these values. Okay, to return the total time, which is this total variable, then it gives me days, hours, minutes, and seconds. So these are the values I've asked the function to return based on the values I have specified. I have added another function from line 15 to 37. This function I've called initialize clock. So this is a function that will initialize the clock. I passed it 2 arguments or 2 parameters. First is the ID. The second is the end time. I've already mentioned the end time property, but the ID it would also look for the ID value. So the two parameters here, ID and end time. Line 16 to 20, I've defined a few variables there. The variable names are self-explanatory. I've set them to equals to document.getElement by ID. Notice I passed it the ID here. And basically the document.query selector method is used to return the first element that matches a specified CSS selector or selectors in the document. All right. So the query method only returns the first element that matches the specified selector. So here, these are the selectors. So we've got this variable here equals to clock.query selector and passed it the days variables. Notice we created, if we go up here, we created these variables there. So we've got the returns, days, hours, and so on. So that's what it's referring to. The hours here, the query selector will return that, and that will return these. So these days, hours, minutes, these are, if we go in our HTML, which you see there here, we've got this ID. We've got, let's scroll up. We've got class hours, we've got minutes, and we've got seconds. So if I go back to our, you see, notice the dot here represents a class. Anyway, if you've got an ID, it will be a hashtag. So the dot represents a class. So this query.selector method takes in the day class, hour class, minutes class, and seconds class. These classes were all defined in the HTML. All right. That's what that means. Created another function here on line 22 called update clock. This will be used to update the clock. Given a variable of, it will take the variable we defined earlier, get time remaining, passed it that end time. All right. And then these are various other properties. So the days.span.inner element, set that to the t variable.days. And notice here I've used a slice method. The slice method basically is used to extract parts of a string, and it returns the extracted parts in a new string. So the first character usually has a position of 0, the second has a position of 1, and so on. However, you can also use negative numbers to select from the, if you're using negative number, it will make the selection from the end of the string. String is also known as text. We've got an if statement here saying if this value is less than or equals to this, then clear the time interval. And we've got, then we've got the update clock. We've got the variable time interval equals to set interval. So we're updating the clock every milliseconds. That's what that means. All right, just to update the clock. Okay, line 38 and 39, I've added a variable here called deadline. Set it equals to a new date object, and we passed it, used the date.pass method, and we've got some values here in this new date method object. So we add in a plus 7, so 7 days of the week, and then times 24 hours of the day, times the 60 seconds, 60 seconds give you 1 minute, and then 60 seconds again. Then multiply it by the interval, which is this interval here. Okay, and here we call this function here the initialize function. This clock here, we're calling this function here, and we've passed it two variables. We passed it the clock div, which is the actual clock div, and also we passed it this variable called deadline. All right, so we're calling this function we defined in line 15. We're calling it here to initialize the clock, to get the clock started. All right, so if there are any parts of this functions you don't understand, please do let me know. This here, the hours of span dot inner means it will replace what's in the div, this div here. This, we've got a span element here. If we go to our HTML, they are all defined here, the span. So that's what it's referring to. It will replace the content with these values. All right, 0 plus this t here refers to the variables, dot the hours, minutes refers to these values we've already defined. I've already mentioned what the slice method does. All right, so that's it. I'll just save the code, and if we open our, all right, this is the clock. If I refresh it, that function should kick in and initialize the clock. All right, there you go. So we've set the clock and it's ticking away. I'll show you how to change. If you wanted to change the days, I'll currently set it to the timer for that day. If we go, this is where we actually set the timer. I've set it at the moment to 7 days. So if you wanted to change, for example, set the timer for an event that's happening in 30 days time, this is where you change it. You change this number to 30. These you can leave as standard, because this will represent the hour, this will represent the minutes, this will represent the second, and this will be the time interval. All right, so the only thing you really need to change, if you want to change the days, this is where you would change it. All right, just to let you know. So that's it. Our countdown clock is ticking away. I've currently set it at the moment for an event that will expire in 6 days time. So it's counting down to the event at the moment. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.